Hi, so I've been having a few thoughts about identity and I wanted to make a video, and I was actually going to make this video outside, but I'm at my mother's house and one of the neighbors just came outside and I still don't really feel comfortable making videos when there's people kind of, walking past or something like that. I'm a little bit self-conscious about that for whatever reason. So I wanted to talk about identity and some of my thoughts about it. So I think one thing about identity that I've been thinking about is, I think there is such a thing as over consuming certain content that kind of gets in your head and you start, trying to apply it to your life, whatever way that takes. And sometimes I consume content about, or I read about things like, going through certain stages of development, and how if you don't go through certain stages properly, then you struggle later on in life, and how that can affect your identity and all that. And I think those are really interesting theories, and there's something to that for sure. But I think there is such a thing as kind of over-identifying with some of these theories, and I, in general, have a tendency sometimes to over-identify with certain theories or concepts or ideas, even some that I've thought of myself. Excuse the glare on my glasses. So I've been thinking about the idea of identity when it comes to developing yourself in the outer world, so to speak, and how, it might be much more difficult, even according to some of these theories, to go out into the world and achieve something or do something specific when you don't really have a strong sense of self, whatever that means. But when you just feel internally that, somehow it feels like something is missing in terms of my identity, or like a piece of the puzzle is missing and I don't identify strongly with anything, if that makes sense. And maybe that is important for humans. Maybe it is important to go through certain stages and have a strong sense of identity or strong sense of self, in order to go out into the world confidently and know what you want and what your values are, and to do something on top of that. So if you feel that you're this kind of person, then you go into the world and you do something that aligns with that kind of person, if that makes sense. So if one of your strong core values is creativity and making art, then you can become an artist. You can go out into the world and become an artist, and that aligns with you then. And you can do other things as well, in terms of you can do odd jobs, and you can do other 9-to-5 jobs or whatever you need to do. But if at the core you're an artist and you want to be an artist, then, and you feel strongly about that, then it's much easier to go out into the world and do things around that subject if you feel strongly that that is one of your values. But for me, for example, I have a prominent Neptune in the chart. I have Sun square Neptune, for example, and so that kind of corresponds to this idea of not having a strong sense of self. I know I can pinpoint likes and dislikes and interests and things like that. I do have a list of interests that I have, but for whatever reason, it's very difficult for me to know like who I am when I go into the world, like in the context of the world, and so my hand is large when I put it like that. Sorry about that. It's kind of a weird setup, but I kind of like it. Like, what was I saying? So Sun square Neptune, having a hard time knowing who you are, a weak sense of self almost. And it's like, I know I have a list of interests, a list of likes and dislikes that I can count, in terms of like my interests and things like that. I know what I like musically, I know what I like in terms of movies, things like that. But when it comes to going out into the world, it's difficult for me, because it's like, it's hard for some people. For example, if you have a Sun Neptune aspect like I do, it's hard to know who you are in the sense of going out into the world and making something of yourself. It's hard to know who you are or what you're capable of in the context of other people, in the context of the real world. So when you're in your bubble, it's easy to just, do whatever you want to do and just kind of wing it. But when you go out into the world and you want to do something, and you have to do something, it's kind of like, it's hard to know who you are outside of that bubble and who you are in the context of other people. And so I was just having some general thoughts about that, really. I mean, for example, if you're like I was, pretty shy at school, maybe a little bit isolated at school, which I was for a while, it's kind of like it's hard to, maybe it is true, according to those theories, what they say is that it can be hard to develop a sense of identity and a strong sense of confidence in yourself and your identity because you didn't go through certain steps properly. And I just find it interesting to think about because, on the one hand, it sounds dramatic and it sounds like, well, surely people can overcome things. And we have like a lot of content about things like that, like overcoming obstacles, and you did these things wrong in the past, you didn't develop in this way in the past, but you can do things later, you can go back to school later, you can do courses later on in life, you can learn to drive at a later age, you can learn to swim at a later age, things like that. But I think maybe it is true, and I'm just kind of pondering these things just in general, like maybe it is true that it takes more effort, in terms of it's more difficult to do certain things if you didn't if you didn't go through certain steps in the past. And so sometimes I find it slightly frightening as much as interesting to kind of read those things and watch videos about those things, about going through certain stages, and if you miss these stages, then you're kind of struggle in certain ways. You have a weaker sense of identity, weaker social skills, maybe weaker confidence, confidence issues, because you didn't sort of develop yourself. And it's like this, it's like we have this idea, and it's just interesting to flesh it out. We have this idea that, you go through certain stages and then you come out of it and you're like one step above now, and you will never be the same again, and you can go out into the world now and do things. But of course, even the people that are super well developed, they still have challenges. And maybe it is also true that some people have more challenges than other people, because, for example, if I didn't socialize very well at school or at college, then maybe it is true that, yeah, okay, now I have a weaker sense of self. But also that comes from other things. So I do have the Sun-Neptune aspect. So it's like it's part of my hard wiring. It's part of my psychology already to kind of blend and merge and lose a sense of like what I want and my own identity. I can know how I am at a given time, what I'm doing at a given time, but it's hard for me to understand myself sometimes in the context of like the larger context of the world. And so I was just thinking about, well, is it really, is it really extremely hard to go out into the world and know what you want to do if you didn't develop certain stages properly, and you feel like you're somehow like you've fallen behind in some areas or something like that? So it's not that you're not capable of anything. You are capable, but it's like, you wouldn't, I tell this to people sometimes, maybe in some level it's like a self-defense mechanism, is that I sometimes say or think that, you wouldn't become a competitive swimmer if you don't know how to swim, or something like that. And I kind of use these, maybe subconsciously it is like an excuse or some kind of rationalization that I tend to do, is that like, well, yeah, I mean, if you don't go through certain stages properly, then you can't be expected to go out into the deep water and like become a competitive swimmer if you don't even know how to swim yet. And not that you can't learn to swim later on, so to speak, but it can be much more difficult to maybe motivate yourself as well when you already feel like you've missed certain steps, or you didn't go through certain steps properly. And I think with identity, it's interesting that we're almost like expected to have like this strong sense of identity in the world, like this is who I am. But it's also in a way putting yourself in a limited box in a way, because we all tend to kind of see from our own perspective and like through our box, so to speak. But if I just, maybe on some level, if you really just identify with something very strongly, then you kind of refuse everything else. So if I feel that these are the music tastes that I like, So I'm not going to listen to this music, or this music doesn't feel like me. But I mean, the music isn't you. It's not really you. It comes from other people. It comes from the external world, but you're internalizing it in a way that creates an identity for you, and that's fine. But and the other side of that is, if you don't identify with anything strongly, then that also leaves you vulnerable, and it leaves you as being too fluid. And this is kind of the way that I feel about myself sometimes, is that like I like so many different music, so many different things, and that's great. It's great to be open-minded like that, but it also means that I don't identify strongly with anything. I don't see myself and who I am in the context of the world. Like, I'm this kind of person who listens to this kind of music, or I'm this kind of person that goes out in the world and tries to achieve these kinds of things. Like, I don't have that. And as a Sun Neptune person, it is interesting because you are almost expected to have that, especially as an adult and as you get older, you're expected to know who you are. But what does that really mean? I know my interests. I like psychology. I like music. I like nature. I like art. I like sharing my thoughts with people. If anybody, hopefully can get something out of it. I like reading psychology books. I like reading other kinds of books. I like movies, but I don't identify strongly with a certain way of being in the world. And maybe that's also why subconsciously I'm trying to find all these things like astrology, different elements of psychology, personality types, to kind of understand myself. And I think that's something that a lot of us do, is that we find frameworks to help understand ourselves. And some people do that more than others. Some people cling very strongly to certain identities. It's just an interesting concept. I just wanted to talk about a few of my thoughts about this, because I am at a place in my life where I find it difficult to know, like, okay, well, what do I want in life? Like, I know I want to be happy. I know I want to be at peace, whatever that means, really. I want to do something that interests me. I want to have, my interests, but it's also just a lack of confidence, in the sense that if you didn't develop a strong identity or a strong sense of like, this is me, and I'm gonna, not cling to this, but I'm gonna hold on to this in a strong way. If you didn't develop that, then it can be more difficult to have the confidence to go out into the world and do something very specifically and substantially, and also what's the word? Sort of like in a stable way, like consistently. Do it consistently. It's hard, because if you're constantly jumping from like interest to interest, or identity. Some people might jump from identity to identity in a way, or just that's one way that this can manifest, is that you're kind of not landing on a specific identity for a long time. You're kind of trying to find yourself, but after a certain age, you're kind of expected to know who you are, and you're no longer like trying on different identities or something. But what if you missed those steps? Like, if you didn't experiment a lot with your identity as a teenager, for example. I can't think of a specific way that I did that really as a teenager. I probably had my moments, yes, but if you kind of miss those steps, then how do you go out into the world and really do something that means something to you, if you didn't really get a strong hold on who you are? Even if you know what your interests are, and you know your likes and dislikes, but there's still a sense of not really holding on to it strongly or something. So I feel like very, I don't feel like a specific person. And I heard somebody say this in a video as well. I think they were talking about being an Enneagram 9. I watched this video years ago. I think it's since been deleted off YouTube, but somebody was talking about, I would love to watch this video again, but somebody was talking about how they don't feel like there's a person inside of them. Like, they don't have like a sense of like, this is me, and I'm like a human being, or like, not that you don't feel like you're a human being, but like, what he literally said was something like, I don't feel like there's a person inside of me. And that is super interesting. And it's something that I relate to a certain degree, because I know that I am a person, but it can be hard when you don't have a sense of yourself very strongly or something like that. And, you know, we could go on and on about that, but I just want to share a few of my thoughts about this. So, you know, how strong of an identity do we need to survive or to get on well in the world, to do something in the world? How important is it to know like what we want? Or can we just float through life doing things that interest us? And I mean, that is also valid. I can make another video about that, and I've read about that a lot. Is that that's also valid? Is that just going through life, experiencing different things, and finding value in different things and meaning in different things. Maybe that's the way that I should do it. For example, if I can't cultivate or feel a strong sense of self, maybe it is enough to just go through life doing different things and experience life rather than trying to define it or something. Yeah, some of my thoughts about this. If you want more thoughts from me, do subscribe and leave a like if you got something out of this, if you appreciated this. Yeah, thank you.